Alrighty, folks, time for part 2 of yesterday's video on vice presidents, potential picks for Trump's 2024 VP candidate. Going back over, in case you missed yesterday, the assumptions here are that Trump is going to be nominated, at the very least. He will be the one on the Republican ticket because he's 50 points ahead of everyone else, so it's not really realistic considering anything else at this point. And even if, as I think is quite possible, he will not be on the ballot in all 50 states, there is still going to be a GOP convention. He is still going to be nominated, and there is going to be a vice president who is nominated at the convention as well. And so Trump, I think, is probably going to pick someone who he feels has undying loyalty to him personally. I think that's probably going to be his number one qualification. He was more pragmatic in 2016 by picking Mike Pence, picking someone who was, not a big Trump guy, because I guess he was trying to pull a page out of, Reagan in 1980, picking George H.W. Bush. But in 2024, he's not the outsider. It's not that he needs the GOP, it's that the GOP needs him. And so he's not going to give any concessions. He is going to state on his own, without any input from anyone else, who he wants to be his VP. And so everyone that I've outlined from yesterday to today as potential VP candidates, I base not on whether or not I think they would be, the best VP pick. I mean, I did. I told you what my thoughts were on them. But I didn't pick the initial list of people based on who I think, if I were, sitting in a closed room and I were trying to come up with like the most optical presidential ticket. These were not my final 5. These were the final 5 people, the only 5 people I think at this point that Trump is considering to be his vice president. They weren't the 5 people that I think Karl Rove wants to be vice president. They weren't the 5 people that I think Rona Romney, the chairman of the Republican Party, they're not the 5 people that I think she would want nominated to be VP. But the party apparatchiks, as I said, are going to have no room to tell Trump who his VP is going to be. Trump will decide who his VP is going to be. And if the GOP doesn't like it, if they want to kick Trump out of the party, I think Trump would be just as happy to run without them. Because, as I said, it is they who need him, not he who needs them. So today I want to focus on the last guy that I couldn't get to yesterday just because I didn't want to go over 30 minutes, and that is Vivek Ramaswamy, who at this point is my favorite. I would say Matt Gaetz from yesterday would have been my favorite, but I don't seriously think that he's interested or even angling to be vice president. I think that on the likelihood, like, he's number 5 and he's a distant 5th. It's really the other 4, Donalds, Lake, who's the other woman? Now I'm losing my memory. Greene, of course. Donalds, Lake, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Vivek, I think, are the real people who are angling, who are really trying to push themselves in to be vice president and want the job. Now, maybe this would be classic Trump. He sees 4 people who want the job, and he thinks, I'm going to pick anyone but those 4 people. But I'm not going to address that kind of scenario right here. Trump trying to, be a showman and pick a wild card that nobody's even thinking of. He could do that, but then that would make all of this pregame show, it would make it absolutely irrelevant. So I gave my thoughts on the 4, and now it is time for number 5, who, at this stage, is my favorite, who I would be most excited about if Trump picked, and that's Vivek. Now, Vivek is someone who I have been, I've had apprehension towards him since he first got into the race. I was surprised that he got into the race, which I was more surprised that it was surprising to me, because normally I can pick up on this stuff a bit better. But just, he had such a low profile before this that it never occurred to me that he was trying to set up a run for president. He just kind of came out of nowhere, and he started appearing on talk radio and talking about his anti-ESG ETF, which I just thought was interesting from a finance and culture war perspective. So I was interested in what he was doing, but that's not the kind of thing that I would think you would do if you're trying to run for president. That's like not your opening salvo is, I'm going to start an anti-ESG ETF, and we're going to invest in stuff, like tobacco and oil companies. Actually, I shouldn't say that, because I think a lot of the tobacco companies are kind of ESG friendly, so that might not be a good example. But anyway, you get the point. This was more of a niche issue. It's a very important issue. I think it's one of the most crucial issues in our country, ESG investing and opposition to it. But then all of a sudden, the guy's running for president. I didn't get why, and I think it's taken him a while to sort of find a good political identity of himself, differentiate himself, and find a footing. And as he's been improving, we've been seeing steadily, he went from being a complete unknown to now being, tied for second place in a lot of polls with DeSantis. As DeSantis' star falls, you're seeing Vivek rise. This is the common narrative that we're hearing everywhere. And a lot of people, I think fairly, are very skeptical of him because he is an unknown. And he probably, if you look back at old tweets, now I haven't looked too deeply into this, you probably can find some stuff that's pretty disagreeable that he said in the past. And he's probably, if you want to paint it this way, flip-flopped on issues. Now, flip-flopping on issues is an interesting concept, because a flip-flop to me means essentially that you're changing your publicly stated position for a disingenuous reason. You often see politicians do this when the winds of change begin to blow. So I remember Marco Rubio, devout Catholic, right? Of course, he supports traditional marriage. Well, as soon as the Supreme Court ruled gay marriage in all 50 states, Marco Rubio said, well, it's settled law now, time to move on. Gay marriage is the law of the land. That is an example of a flip-flop. As soon as the wind started to blow the other direction, he very passionately went from being, on one side of the issue to the other side of the issue. And most importantly, he was a politician and a public figure at both of those times. Vivek Ramaswamy was not a politician or public figure until this year. And so if he, as a CEO or a private individual, had different ideas, but he had a Twitter account, and he tweeted things in the past that we might disagree with now, and that he, in the present, would disagree with, allegedly, I would not call him a flip-flopper. I would say this is a guy who's probably was in a process of political maturation, and I think, like a lot of us over the past few years, and even months, and, so the time frame of less than a year, we're growing as we see the state of the country, as we realize things are worse and worse than even we thought before. And as the issues and the zeitgeist is moving at lightning speed, naturally, your opinions can change. And that I don't have a problem with. Because if you took, me from 2016, or me from 2020, or me even probably if you went back to, 2021, all through that time, I've been changing. Not fundamentally, what I believe, not deep stuff, but, things that I thought were important versus not important priorities, change. And as your priorities change, you focus on one thing more than another, and then your opinions can become more intense. And that doesn't make you a flip-flopper. And so, to the question, because people, I think, I had at least one comment yesterday. Vivek lately has been so well in tune that it almost sounds like it's too good to be true. He's telling us, he's getting better and better at telling us what the voters, what they actually want to hear. We're not used to that from candidates for public office. And so there's a question: has he just figured out, what everyone online is saying, and he's tapping into that, and how we believe? Yeah, it's a very real possibility. But when you consider the alternative most often, is someone who doesn't tell you what you want to hear, and also acts on it. So, for example, we know if Mike Pence or Nikki Haley, if they were to get into office, they don't tell us things we want to hear. No, they're not pandering. They're not pandering to us. I will give them credit for that. But I think when they say that they want to ramp up the Ukraine war, I tend to believe them, and I don't want that to happen. So I'd rather take a chance on someone who is telling me that they believe in all the same things that I do, that they have the same priorities, that they think that the problems that I see in this country are real, and that they think they're problems too. I'd rather take a chance on that person rather than someone who I know will do the wrong thing. But then, okay, so if you compare Vivek to, a Mike Pence, sure, you can say he's easier than that, but that's the lowest bar you can possibly clear as a Republican. Okay, congratulations, you're the recipient of the Better Than Mike Pence award. But what about someone who I kind of poo-pooed yesterday as a VP candidate, Marjorie Taylor Greene? Because I said, I think she's a genuine person, but I think that her political ideas are so thin that she could be manipulated once she is, at positions of power, just like Trump was, by, all the people around him. I think that while her emotions and her instincts are good, those are a benefit to her, she doesn't have anything beyond that. And so those instincts could go the wrong way. They could be manipulated to get results that are disadvantageous towards someone like me. And so with Vivek, you have the opposite potential risk. People question his authenticity. They think that he is just well in tuned, and he knows what he needs to say to impress us, and he's doing that. And so he could get in office and completely change what he does, and just end up being a different person because people don't trust him personally. And so, considering there's a risk either way, which risk would I rather take? In 2016, I would have said I'd rather take a risk on someone who knows more, says the right thing, but might end up betraying me later, rather than someone who I know does not know, but their heart's in the right place. And back in 2016, the person who I think was ill-informed, but had good intentions, was Trump. And I think on net, he ended up being much better than I had feared he would be. And so that would be the case to make someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's on the opposite end of the risk scale from Vivek, the vice president. But considering you already have that element with Trump, you have the low information but good instincts of Trump already at the top of the ticket. So I'd be more comfortable taking the opposite risk to balance him out with someone like Vivek, who I feel like is really sharp, knows all the issues. But yes, you could say we don't know him well enough. He could just be a total poser. He could be a very talented actor. And if that's the case, then if he's vice president and he gets in, he would be a net negative on the administration and on the country. But if he is genuine, his knowledge and intellect would help keep Trump focused and on track, because Vivek would be able to interposition himself between Trump and Trump's terrible advisors and terrible staff to try and, keep the administration on a good track. So that's kind of how I think about it. That's my thought process, and that's why I've become attracted to the idea of Vivek as a VP for Trump. If it was a different guy at the top of the ticket, I might not feel that way. But I think that Vivek's potential flaws and potential strengths pair well with Trump. You're essentially hedging your risk. Every every candidate carries a certain kind of risk about them. And so, if you can balance the strengths and weaknesses of a president against their vice president, I think you could end up on net with a better result. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.